So last year, I was chatting with a friend who lives in Aba, and midway into our conversation, she paused and said, Bia Ukamaka, why are you still speaking English like an Arera market woman? I had been living in Vermont for almost a year and had previously visited the United States in 2016. And to my friend, these combined periods were enough time for me to have acquired an American accent. And she was disappointed when I said I was not interested in doing that at all. But I liked that she said I spoke like an Arera woman. I was happy she thought I talked like someone who grew up in Aba. Because 26 years ago, when I was about 12 years old, an uncle dismissed my accent as Ngendo Gwauza. You see, I and my parents and siblings were living in Kano at that time, and we only visited our hometown in Abagana every 2 years during Christmas to celebrate the holidays with our distant and aged relatives. And so that uncle, who I was only meeting for that time, on the very first time, thought my Igbo had been tampered with. He said I talked like the Hausa, and I could tell from his tone that he felt it was not a good thing. It was in the way he wrinkled his nose, his face squeezed like he had smelled something nasty, and that crushed my spirit. Before then, it had never occurred to me to pay attention to how anyone spoke their Igbo. I mean, in Kano, we lived next door to our fellow Ndibo from Umuchu, Oga, Adazieno, Eziowele, Nkwere, Ngwa, Obosi, and so many other places from Anibo. And what mattered to me at that time was that we spoke a common language and that we understood each other. So when my uncle condemned my accent, my 12-year-old mind felt I must do something about it. And this was because I wanted to feel a sense of belonging with my cousins who lived in the village. I wanted to be able to join them to Ezecheke to watch our festivals. I wanted to be able to sing and dance with them without anyone pointing out how different I was. I wanted to be like my cousins. So the first thing I did after that confrontation was to search through our family's old vinyl collection for anything that could magically improve my Igbo. In those days, we shared our big house with my late uncle and his family, and we had these large stacks of vinyls no one bothered with anymore. I rifled through these records and stopped at the one with a theatrical poster of a woman wearing a shiny crown. The name on the cover said she was Queen Theresa Onuorah of Unubi. It was her Igbo album, and I immediately liked her. Maybe it was because of the way she wore her hair, the entire length of her braids adorned with beads and cowries, a style I had never seen on any woman I knew. Or maybe it was the elaborate dress, her arm and legs layered with fluffy fur of an unknown animal, her neck weighed down with rows of beads. For dramatic effect, I assumed at that time, she clutched onto a metal staff that reminded me of the ones I had seen on DPS in Hollywood movies. And I could immediately tell that she did not sing the type of music my parents liked us to listen to. You see, I come from a low-income and very Anglican Nigerian family, and my parents allowed us to listen only to gospel music, especially everything by Don Moen, The Voice of the Cross, Jean Reeves. My dad liked Osadebe, and my mom loved Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers. Those lyrics were not considered sinful at that time. So while I was staring at Queen Theresa Onuorah's record, an older relative walked in. He snatched it from me and said I must never listen to such music because it was hidden. And for those who are watching, I know that the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word hidden is witchcraft, and those relatives you are told will spiritually haunt you if you ever set a foot in your village. That older relative said that Queen Theresa Onuorah had refused to give her life to Christ, that she sings for Ndo Menana, idol worshippers, and that Umu Chineke like us, those who want to sit on the right hand of God in heaven, do not listen to people like her. So I returned to listening to the kind of songs I was permitted to, and my accent remained as it was. I could never do anything about it anyway. But then 7 years later, I met the man that became my husband and moved to Aba to live with him. Now, my husband is Catholic, and at that time he was fanatically so, but he mixed his Christianity with a full dose of Igbo tradition. He desperately loves the likes of Queen Theresa Onuorah and Chiperikoma Okoye, just as he did gospel singers like Chinyere Udoma and Gozie Okeke. With my husband, it was okay to participate in the enjoyment of music others had deemed sinful. And on my first full listening of Onuorah's album Igbo, I immediately thought our people's criticism of her songs were ridiculous. And this was because I had expected to hear her encourage people to participate in evil or in gruesome ritual practices as seen in Nollywood movies. But the central themes in her songs were similar to what our gospel singers preached. She talked about family, the consequences of greed and evil, and communion and social responsibility. She also acknowledged that there is a creator who watches and judges. She sang about how to be good neighbors. Her songs are often moralistic too, just like our gospel music, and she sang them in splendid Igbo. She could go for more than an hour without borrowing a single word from the English language to convey her message, something I rarely find in Igbo speakers these days. But homophobia was fast gaining ground within our Igbo Christian community at that time, and many people had a problem with her dancers, especially the men who carried themselves as women would. To them, that was enough reason, including her garb, for them to declare her sinful. Now, I deeply love how I was raised, but I often wonder how we would have turned out. That is me and my siblings. How we would have turned out if we were allowed to participate and appreciate our Igbo traditions fully. If my brothers were allowed to perform in the Imam ceremony, to appreciate these traditions that make the Igbo what the Igbo is, just as we had wholeheartedly and without questioning embraced our Christian rituals and practices. The American writer James Baldwin talked about how love is a state of grace and the universal sense of quest and daring and growth. It takes a lot of maturity, I think, and open-heartedness to love someone or an idea that is very different from yours. The Christian Bible also talked about this openness. It encouraged people to love their neighbors as they love themselves. If we're able to do that, I think, to love people for who they are, we wouldn't be so quick to condemn them. We wouldn't be so quick to dismiss them as inferior. Music matters to me. Igbo music matters more to me. And I believe it does to so many people. And it is why I am focusing on Queen Theresa Onuorah's legacies and how she, through her music, uplifted the Igbo cultural heritage and invited her listeners to join her in the celebration of our musical traditions. Some time ago, I got into an argument with a friend after I told him that I was working on an ambitious anthropological project about the Igbo cosmology and the Igbo pantheon of gods. And he wondered if I was still the Christian I claimed to be. He said our cultural heritage was rife with evil practices like human sacrifices. He said as a good Christian, I must never embark on such a project. And I reminded him of the dichotomy between the Catholic and the Protestant churches in the 1500s, which furthered the persecution and burning at stake of more than 40,000 people. For effect, I drew in the Catholic Church's long history of sexual assault on small boys. And how is the sacrament of the Catholic Church different from Igbo Afa? I told him. Of course, he did not like that question. But I said this because I was upset. I said it because I have yet to hear of any belief system out there in the world that doesn't have a troubled history. What I think should not be tolerated is for another belief system to lord this morality over the other. Once, when we traveled home for Christmas, my mother warned us from entering a relative's house because there was rumor making rounds that their grandmother had killed her husband. And this was at a time when priests were fond of blaming people's misfortune on their non-Christian relatives. We would often hear stories of people who brought their priests to the village to destroy their ancestors' deities. But the truth is, I also know an aunt who, before she died, confessed to how she spiritually persecuted my dad and tried to kill him. I know an uncle whose siblings fled home because he had threatened to harm them with ogu following a land dispute. The boundary between my village and the next, which is not far from my father's backyard, is currently abandoned because a famous Dibia has sunk his staff on it and ordered his gods to smite anyone who dared buy a piece of land. I know the stories of traditionalists who aren't nice people, who hurt their family members and neighbors over simple disagreements. And Queen Theresa Onuorah addressed all of this in her songs. In Onyi Lokanye Now, she sings about her fear of the night and why she must go home on time to avoid falling prey to the enemy who lurks in the dark. In Aili Ukamaka, she sings about the devious woman who killed her husband. In Nnenanwa De Soku, she calls out those who enjoy slandering their neighbors. These themes are familiar. These themes are familiar. We hear them in our gospel songs, and despite being a good citizen, Queen Theresa Onuorah has suffered much condemnation. Now, there is an Igbo saying, Ifekulo, Ifakudebeya, which can be translated to mean that when one thing stands, another stands beside it. This saying comes from the old Igbo principle of plurality and of coexistence, which advocates for balancing complementary opposites as the way we can maintain harmony in the world. The Igbo believes that two or more things can exist on the same plane and at the same time. Chinua Achebe spoke about this in his collection of lectures, Home and Exile, in which he shared the story of the neighboring town that had requested to settle in Ogidi. And when the Ogidi people welcomed these neighbors, they did not foist their religious beliefs upon them, even when they could have. This principle was why in the olden days you would easily find people paying loyalties to different gods, all of them coexisting within the same clan, none belittling their neighbors' choices. But the British brought Christianity and everything changed. A.E. Afibo, in his book Sir Ralph Moore and the Economic Development of Southern Nigeria from 1896 to 1903, wrote about how the colonizer violently got the Igbo to forsake their belief system. What the colonizers did, according to Afibo, was this. They would capture an Igbo village and assemble the captives before their oracles, and then with modern explosives, they would blow up these traditional places of worship. And as these cultural sites burned, the colonizers would point at the ruins and tell their captives that their gods were powerless. Some of the oracles that suffered such violent treatments included the Long Juju of Arochukwu, the Abara of Ozuzu, and the Igwe Kaala in Umunoha. This violent disruption in the Igbo ecosystem was the first step in installing a hierarchy of beliefs within our communities. The next step was to establish schools where indigenous people were taught how to read and write in English, and Western education was exalted as a form of prestige everyone must aspire to. So it wasn't surprising to see the gradual decline in interest in the Igbo ideographic writing like the Anyocha script of the Enuani in present-day Delta State and the Insibidi of the Ekoi peoples in present-day southeastern Nigeria. Reading and writing in English was then elevated as the superior. Also, converting to Christianity was considered progressive. And decades later, our people would hang framed photographs of the Christian Jesus Christ who looks like the white colonizers that brought us Christianity. White became synonymous with the Messiah, and our peoples were socialized to aspire to that whiteness, to look up to it, to covet it, to be validated by it. Now, when I shared this finding with a friend, let's call her X. X dismissed this as yet another blame Olympics. She said I was overthinking things. She said she was tired of Nigerians who are fond of blaming the British for all their problems. Can't we just move forward and stop living in the past, she told me. But then in 2016, when I told her I had been selected to represent Nigeria at the International Writers Program at the University of Iowa, She was happy for me. She said I had finally arrived, that I will now make my family proud. Your career will take off, she said. And while I appreciated this enthusiasm, it struck me that she never took my writing seriously until America called. And if you follow the happenings in the Nigerian literary circle, you will notice this similar trend. Writers are given their due mostly after they have succeeded in getting Western endorsement. They are often celebrated more than their counterparts who live in Nigeria. When I mentioned this to X, she simply shrugged. This is the way things are, right? She said. But thankfully, we have people like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Chika Onigwe who, through their various writing programs, are giving our counterparts at home all the support and the platform they need to tell their stories. Queen Theresa Onuorah, I argue, also understood this, and it was why she constantly reminded us of the principle of complementary opposites. We can have our Western endorsements, but we should also have our own endorsements. We should preserve our own. In Ijele Lupeko, she sings, Omenana ndedele ndi kanka anyị weludele, omenana anyị dele anyị, which can be loosely translated to, let other people's culture be for them, so that ours may be for us. Let our culture be for us. And this heartfelt call reminds me of the Igbo saying, Ebebelu ugobelu, ngesi benye bena nkukwanya. Let the kite perch, let the eagle perch, the one which says the other should not, may its wing break. Our cultural heritage, for example, language, are a part of our identity markers. They are the things we carry with us into the world. But there are uneven appreciation of cultural heritages all over the world, which I fear have led to the erosion and even the impending death of so many languages. During a recent conversation with a group of linguists and language enthusiasts, some of the guests who tuned in showed slightly more interest in getting their children to learn foreign languages like French and Chinese and Spanish. English is already a given. They believe that these foreign languages obliges their speakers with more political and social capital on the international playing field. And I get their point. It was why my teachers back in the 90s punished us for speaking vernacular in the classroom, but applauded us when we spoke French. In fact, they prepared us for the annual statewide competition with students from other schools for prizes hosted by the Alliance Francaise and the British Council. Recently, I learned that French language is also celebrated annually all over the world every March 20th. And with over 300 million speakers worldwide, the language ranks as the 5th most spoken, tagging behind Chinese, English, Spanish, and Arabic. And 2/3 of those speakers live in African countries. In fact, one statistic has projected that by 2070, there possibly will be over 700 million French speakers around the world. I often wonder where my Igbo will be by that time. Would Igbo be blossoming? Would it be dying? A friend once told me that Igbo language is already dying a slow death, and I thought that was an exaggeration until I visited my hometown and met my little cousin who can utter a word of Igbo. She is 5 years old. When I asked her, Nne kedu, her mother laughed and said, Oka, my daughter doesn't speak Igbo. Swallow your Igbo on Gonago. I was horrified, but it soon dawned on me that my 3 children also speak English all the time, more than they speak Igbo. I hadn't been paying attention, and it took only a moment afterward to trace the root of this problem. My children spend all the time, every morning until evening, in the classroom, and they are not allowed to speak Igbo within the school premises, except once every week, I think on Thursdays, when they very briefly are taught an Igbo language class. They go to school every day, and even sometimes on weekends for extramural classes. And since they spend the major part of their lives in the classrooms and only come home to sleep and eat and shower and do some chores, they are subjected to a long life of speaking little Igbo. It does not help also that the church services they attend are conducted by 7:15 and in English. These and many more are why you are more likely to see many children in southeastern Nigeria who can't utter a word of Igbo or who understand it and speak little but can't hold long conversations in it. While this reality greatly troubles me, I'm hopeful too. I'm hopeful because of conferences like this and the teeming conversations about the preservation of our cultural heritage. And I'm also shamelessly in love with the work of Queen Theresa Onuorah. Like me, she embraces the idea of complementary opposites. She believes that two or more things can exist at the same time without the other relegating the next to the background. She sings, "Mụ na onye ndị ga-agba egwu m, mụ na onye ndị ga-agba egwu ndị be anyị ji eje mba, mụ na onye ndị ga-agụkọ onye bụ egwu ndị obodo anyị ji echi eze. Who will dance with me? Who will dance and sing along to this tune my people use when they crown a king?" She wants us to come and participate in this preservation of our heritage, and I think we should accept that invitation. I think dancing with her can help raise new interest in our language and our old musical traditions. And this is how I think we should perform this dance. While we equip our children with the tools they need to become bilingual or multilingual, we should also introduce them to a lot of Igbo music, like the likes of Queen Theresa Onuorah's. Music encourages a warm atmosphere. Children learn more when you merge knowledge with music. Take, for example, the alphabet song, the parts of the body song, those kind of learning resources. My friend's daughter is actively learning how to speak French. When I visited them last December, I saw her reading a pamphlet of French lyrics which are paired with English translations. She would stream the songs on YouTube and sing along as written on the pamphlet, and the English translation made it easy for her to comprehend what she was singing to. We can do that with our own songs too. I have wondered also why we don't have the lyrics of Queen Theresa Onuorah's songs online. Not long ago, a Chinese friend asked if I could write in Igbo, and I was filled with shame. I used to be able to do that back in primary school, when our Anglican communion still conducted Sunday schools, and we had teachers who taught us how to write in Igbo and read long chapters in the Bible. The most proficient among us was always celebrated. The child would be there in the church, standing by the pulpit, a microphone in hand, reciting her Igbo verses. And the adults would clap and cheer, and at the end of her recitation, she is rewarded with gifts. She becomes a sort of local celebrity, an incentive to other children to study harder, to fight for their opportunity in the spotlight. That tradition has since died. I think we should revive it. I also think we should encourage people who speak very little Igbo or foreign accented Igbo. There is nothing I dislike more than our penchant for mocking relatives who don't speak Igbo the way we think they should. That culture of mockery has become what many would call damn if you do, damn if you don't sort of affair. And Queen Theresa Onuorah echoed a similar worry in the later part of Ijele Elubego. She sings, "Amami fenge momo obia dehamma, abikoba alumegu." I don't know how to please the people of the world. Why not just dance with me? I think we should accept that invitation to dance, to collaborate with each other. I think we should reach out far and wide to our people who had long lost interest in our language, for them to also participate in this dance too. That Christmas, after my uncle mocked my accent, I shrank from everyone. I spoke little when talked to, and preferred to stay at home with my mother and help her in the kitchen. I think I would have enjoyed that Christmas better if my uncle hadn't called attention to the way I spoke, if he hadn't made me feel like I had done something bad. To help improve my children's proficiency in Igbo language, my husband first made it a rule that they must speak it in the house. But that tactic failed because to my children it felt like a job. But then he began to offer them rewards whenever they spoke the language with him. And this raised their interest, and their hunger to learn. The other day, I teased my daughter Chidinma that she now speaks Igbo like an Ariara woman, and she laughed. My chest swells every time I call her and she chooses to chat in our language. She gives me hope. She is my daily reminder that we can change the way things are if we really want to change them. Thank you.